Morning, Madison Hills. Wow, it's great to see everybody. So many people I haven't seen in a long time. It's wonderful. We're grateful that you're here. I'm going old school today. There's no iPad, and there's no multimedia. There's just me and a Bible. And this is the way I used to do it before we had multimedia, before we had iPads, before we had the internet, before we had it all. I got my notes in my Bible. So I'm not good as David. I can't remember this stuff. He's so good. The book of Hebrews, if you are a Bible reader, you know that the book of Hebrews chapter 11 is called the Hall of Faith. It's just a list of those who come before us who have been faithful. And it says, by faith, Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain. It says, by faith, Enoch was taken up so that he would not see death. By faith, Noah prepared an ark. By faith, Abraham went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. By faith, Moses was hidden for 3 months. By faith, they passed through the Red Sea. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down. And then the author says, and what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. Generation after generation who have come before them and who have come before us. They walk by faith. By faith. A Sunday school class at Big Hill Avenue Christian Church felt compelled that there needs to be a new Christian church in Madison County. And that class, led by Frank Hendricks, or Frank and Connie, I don't know who one was really leading, but they decided they were going to step out in faith, and they had meetings in homes, and they made the commitment to start a new church. So on the first Sunday of 1984, they met for the first time in Charlie Edwards' garage, a garage behind his house. Emory Emmerich became their minister, Dr. Emory Emmerich from Lexington. And they stayed there for 2 years. And during that 2 years, they bought this piece of property right here. We own all the way down to the street down there. The rest of it's useless, we found out, but we own all that. And they paid $40,000 for it. That was a big step for a church that's just beginning. This meeting at that time in a dry cleaners on 3rd Street. And then they saved and they borrowed. And in 1986, they dedicated this main building right here by faith. By faith, they hired me. Yeah, I hear you, John. I hear you. So I only served in one other church in my whole ministry. It was First Christian Church, Bluff City, Tennessee, a wonderful little church in a small town of 800 that had 7 churches on Main Street. And I was a seminary student at the time, and I was serving there. And one Sunday I get up to preach, and there's John and Sandy Young in the pew. I knew John and Sandy from Broadway Christian Church. And with them were members of Madison Hills, founding members, preacher Anita Sallee. Now, I found out later preacher wasn't a preacher. He was a farmer. He never preached in his life, but they called him preacher. And they came down, and after the service, they invited me to lunch. And we went to Partners, which was the best barbecue restaurant in the world at the time. And preacher wasn't good at this interviewing thing. And he started talking too much, and I heard this thump under the table, and Ida Sallee kicked him in the shin, get him to shut up. But they asked me, would you like to be a minister of Madison Hills? And I said, I'll talk to you about it. So I came up and talked to him about it, walked into this was a brand new building. This is 1988. And I went, yeah, this is pretty good. And we met and we talked and all the things, and it got down to the bottom line is salary. And they said, how much do you need? And I said, $25,000 a year. And their eyes popped open. They said, could you excuse us for a few minutes? They sent me out of the room. And they said, we can't afford that. We can't pay him that, blah, 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 blah. John Young stood up and said, if you ever run short on his pay, I'll make up the difference. And since they had John's guarantee, they said, okay. And so we went to work. Probably one of the first things we did after I became the minister here is we organized a youth committee. At that time, there was no money in the budget for the youth or children's ministries at all, none. And we had a church full of young couples with kids. So we organized a youth committee. Now, to be on the youth committee, all you had to do was be a parent. And so we organized that committee, and they planned activities and teaching for the kids. But we also had to raise money because there was nothing in the budget for the teens. And so we used to have all these fundraisers over and over and over and over. We were having a meeting one time, I think it was Tommy Masters. We were going to do something. He said, well, we got to have a bake sale. And Tommy pulled out a $10 bill, put it on the table. I gave you $10 and we can just have a bakeless bake sale. And everybody chipped in $10 or $15 or $20, and we were glad to do it because we had spent so much working to do those things. But that youth committee, by faith, hired our very first youth minister, Mark Pearson. Mark was a student at KCC. He and his wife Angela were going to school there. I'm not sure Angela was, but Mark was. And he was our part-time youth minister for 4 years while he went to school. And by faith, the youth committee paid for that, not the church. Not long after that, the church continued to grow, and we hired our very first worship minister, paid worship minister, staff member, worship minister, Dr. Jamie Neal. Is Jamie here today? I invited him. No? Oh, that's too bad. Y'all would love Jamie. But Jamie became our first worship minister, and he really stepped up the game. But most of you may not realize, and let me say this right up front, most of the great ideas that happened at Madison Hills didn't come from me. They came from you or some other staff member. And Jamie, we had plateaued. The church was going well. We were growing. We had lots of kids. We had good ministry going on, but it plateaued. It just couldn't grow anymore. It just wouldn't go any farther. And Jamie came to me and he said, we need to have 2 worship services. And I wasn't so sure about that. He said, yeah, we need to have 2 worship services. And so we took Jamie's, and that's his contribution. We went to 2 worship services. Our attendance increased almost 20% overnight. It was incredible what he did for us. Not long after that, we went all in on families and children ministry. Mark was our first youth minister. He was followed by Rob Hill. That didn't last too long. Rob fell in love with one of the girls in the church, and that was the end of that. But we decided to divide it up into children and teens ministry. And so we had never done that before. Our youth ministry was just one big ministry. And so Dan and Vonda Sipple, Dr. Dan Sipple and Vonda, came to me. I didn't go to them and said, we want to do the children's ministry. And if you've seen some of the pictures in the slideshow out there, you've seen them in their orange shirts. And we all know, those of you who were here will remember this. See if you can remember it. God is good. All the time. God is good. Dan Sipple. That's who did that. And then he was followed by Steve and Terry Marino and Kim Masters, who was actually doing preschool. Kim did preschool, and after Dan and Vonda stepped down, Steve and Terry came. We got 20 plus years of service from them. We also, for the first time, hired somebody to be our teen minister. Their only responsibility was teens. Mike Ferris was our first, and he started out part-time, but it wasn't long before we made him full-time. And he is the one who laid the foundation that our teen ministry to this day still works from. Mike gave us 12 years. If you haven't figured it out, I'm pretty easy to work for. And Mike gave us 12 years. And then he was followed by Jeremy Wash, who gave us another 10 years and built on that foundation. Jeremy's here today. Glad you're here today. Who built on that foundation and did a tremendous job with our teens. So the church grew. And the church had excellent ministry. And we were very excited about that. Then, but what you don't know, I guarantee if you were here the whole time, you don't know this. The person who held it all together was Judy Perkins, not me. I went to the elders, yes. I went to the elders once and I said, if something happens, we have to get rid of people. You can fire Jeremy, you can fire the worship minister, you can fire, but we're keeping Judy. I'm telling you, man, this woman worked for 20 years for this church. We worked together side by side. I'm going to tell you the truth. In 20 years, I don't think the woman ever made a mistake. Not one. It's unbelievable. And she played such an important role in that this morning. Well, we continue to move forward and try to move forward. And in order to do that, we decided to contemporize our worship under the leadership of John Lucas. Not everyone appreciated that. We went from piano and organ and hymnals to what we pretty much do today. And the reason we did is John Young was our organist and he only knew 3 hymns. So it kind of limited us a little bit. But we contemporized our worship service, and we had, as you know, if you were here, incredible worship services, including 2 years at Easter at Madison Central. John kind of reneged compared to the others. He only gave us 18 years of effective ministry. Then one day, I stood right here. Right here. By the way, on this stage, I told David not long ago, I said, I just want you to understand, this is still my stage. I'm just letting you use it. And I stood right here and I asked this question. If Madison Hills ceased to exist today, would it make any difference in our community? And I still remember the reaction of the congregation, because everybody knew the answer to that. And the answer was no, it would not, because we were doing nothing beyond these walls. And so we made the commitment to reach out to our community. And that led to so many things happening. First of all, our philosophy was very, very simple. Find people who are already doing good work and partner with them. We didn't see any need to reinvent the wheel because we didn't know what we were doing. We don't need another food bank. We don't need another clothing bank. We need to help those who are already doing great work. And so that was our philosophy. So Doug Justice, who was a member of our church, and Doug Justice was in sales. He could sell ice water to an Eskimo. And he went out in the community and he investigated all of these ministries. And he came back with a list. And he said, I think these are the ones we need to consider. And to this day, there are still ministries that we serve and partner with. Grace Now is just one of them to this day. But other things sprung off of that. That one sentence, Relay for Life, was a big deal for many years in Madison County. Mark Salyer, whose husband Mike passed away from a brain tumor, came and said, I want to do something I want our church to do something for Relay for Life. I said, go right ahead. It's no problem for me. And she put together a team that began to participate in the Relay for Life program here in Madison County. And I don't even think they do it anymore, but at the time it was huge. And we would go up here to the school one night, and you would walk around the track and just be there, and it was just really great. And we raised a lot of money. And Harry Chenault, bless his heart, I remember this so well. We go up and walk on the track. Harry was the guy who said, if you said to him, we're supposed to walk on the track, Harry, he walked on the track all night long. He never stopped. It was an incredible thing. But we had such a great time there. But here's what I want you to know. 1 year, Madison Hills Christian Church was the largest single contributor to Relay for Life in Madison County. I don't mean the largest church contributor. The largest contributor, including sponsors like Walmart and Sherwin-Williams. It was incredible what came from that, and the ministry that was done, and the people that were helped. Our current ministry in times like these, I hope you know about that. Tim Edwards came to me, and he said, let's take the $1 bills we get in the offering and set them aside, and then we can help people that are in need. And we called this ministry in times like these. When times are tough, people can call, and we can consider their need, and we've helped a lot of people. When I retired in 2018, we had given over $45,000 to people through the In Times Like These ministry. It just came out of how can we help the community in times like these. But I think the greatest ministry we ever had here at Madison Hills in the last 40 years was the Christmas meal. Whew. It began small. Bob and Yolande Jones came, I don't know if they came to me or somebody anyway. They said, we know about this ministry called Kids Connection. It was a ministry to underprivileged kids. They reached out and helped them, provided for them. It was a pretty good-sized ministry. And we decided one year we were going to have a meal, a Christmas meal for them, for all the kids and their families in there. So we met in here. And I think we had Santa Claus. I don't even remember the first time. I remember the first time it didn't go so well. It just didn't go so well. But we didn't give up, and we continued to improve it and tweak it and to make it work until in the end, we had the Kids Connection in here. But it was a full-blown production. With Santa Claus, with Sean Hamilton. You know, I came to him when he did it. Did you do it 2 years?
I think so.
Okay. I came to him the third year. You want to be Santa Claus? He says, no. I said, no. He said, why? He says, I can't stand the stories that they tell. I can't take it. I understand that. So we had these kids, we had Santa Claus, we had gifts, we had games, we had all kinds of stuff, and we fed them this great meal. But we expanded. I went down to Madison Towers, 100 apartments. I said, we'd like to bring you all a meal once at Christmas. I went to Willis Manor. Both of these are low-income apartments. And I said, we'd like to bring you a meal. They said, good. So we fed Kids Connection here, we fed Madison Towers. Alan Barnett took the Madison Towers ministry and ran it. Mike and Donna Agee took the Willis Manor ministry and ran it. And we were feeding a lot of people. And then Heather Ferris came to me. Now, I may have this wrong. She was in parole somehow. She was an officer. I don't know if she's a parole officer or what her liaison or whatever she was. She said, you know what? We've got this halfway house out here. It's got 40 or 50 guys in it. He said, they're all good guys. They just what they did is probably something we have done. They just got caught. And they're making a transition from being in prison to regular life. Could we take them a meal? We said, sure. But we found out the meal that we normally prepare is something they have all the time, so we prepared a special meal just for them. And the band got together, and we rehearsed Christmas songs. I'm not talking about hymns. I'm talking about like Rock Around the Clock or whatever, those kind of things. And we went out there and we played for them, and it was a blast, and they loved it. And Tim Edwards again said, You know what? Why don't we gather up a bunch of Christmas cards, blank Christmas cards, and take it to them with pre-stamped envelopes and let them write letters home to their family? And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. Connie Masters was the, what do they call it in the Army? The sergeant that takes care of all the supplies. Supply sergeant. Connie made sure we had everything. Jeff Baker. Jeff Baker, who was the manager of O'Charlie's here. He told me once, he says, my purpose is I feed people. He made sure the meal was right, safe, and good. That's the best ministry in my mind that we ever had at Madison Hills. By faith. By faith. That's the story of Madison Hills Christian Church for the last 40 years. The Hebrew author goes on to write, he says, and what more shall I say, for time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, and Samuel and the prophets. And he talks on about people who were not known, who were faithful, who lived in the desert, who were sought into, and all kinds of things. And then there's a parenthetical statement. He said, those of whom the world was not worthy. Those who came before us of whom the world was not worthy. I knew the people that came before us. All of them. And they too were not worthy of this world.
Take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn through the storms, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When my way grows rare, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is all almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call, hold my hand lest I fall. take my hand. Precious Lord, lead me home.
right, fantastic. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, side note, is anybody else getting hungry? Oh my gosh, so hungry. So I'm only up here for about 35 minutes and we're going to eat. I'm just kidding, just kidding. We're going to try to keep it 10 or 12. So first of all, I want you to be sure to thank the ladies and everyone who was involved in making this great day and especially the food happen. I mean, they've put in a ton of work back there. So let's give it up for them. They work hard. They work hard. We want to recognize them. Yes, they're going to feed us well, so we're so thankful for that. Also, if you were at the hymn sing last night, you know what a blast that was. It was a phenomenal time. Just great songs. My favorite hymn of all time is When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. So got to hear that. It was just beautiful. Had well over 100 people, a phenomenal turnout. We're going to do it again in the future. But I heard a story I wanted to share with you. And to me, I don't know if it'll transfer. To me, it was an extremely powerful and touching story from last night. So Tommy had some guys coming in, and I think it's near the end, and they're loading the piano and the instruments up and everything. And someone had asked Tommy if I was the new pastor, and he was like, yeah. And then someone else said, is he your son? And then it went on a little bit, and they asked Tommy, talking about me, or is he your grandson? I'm like, oh, all right. I love that. Very touching. So, Poppy, where you at? All right, I got you. Love you, Poppy. Love you. Just kidding. So I met with Marty coming in. This is our 40th anniversary, which is super awesome. This May, it'll be my first full year here. Loving to get to know the people, loving to get to know you, just loving the whole vibe. It's fantastic. But Marty and I met sometime right around the beginning of my coming on staff here. And we met in the community room and we were talking, and I was polling him. He didn't know, but I'm just like trying to get the scoop. And I'm like, Marty, we're here 30 years. That's fantastic. I'm like, what is the secret to a phenomenal 30-year ministry? And he digs around in his back pocket and he gets his phone out, and then he flips through, and then he just shows me this picture right here. And I don't know what it means, but apparently this is the deal right here. So 30 years, I don't know. What do you do? Like, is that it? That's the deal? Okay. Well, anyway, we talked a little bit, and he was like, you've got to focus on what's most important. And I was like, well, what is that? And he said, it's discipleship. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean when it's playing out? And he says, no matter what's going on around you, if like you look in the background and people are doing their thing, that's great. But no matter what's going on around you, in that moment, you focus on what's most important. And I got a good glimpse of that with this right here. This is Marty discipling Lonnie. And you see they've got the UK game on right there, finding a spot anywhere and everywhere. And I think, what time was the hymn sing? 6:30. What time did you get here? After the ball game. Okay, yeah. So discipleship still going strong. Well, Marty was telling me about the church and everything. And he said there's a great couple. They own a farm, and they've got horses. It's a beautiful spot. So we had this great opportunity to do like this event this past September. It was wonderful. But right before we got into the mix, it was like, yeah, you got to come out and see it. They ride horses. And I'm like, that's amazing. And I guess there's two things. Connie, come on. He's crushing you. And then number two, look how happy he is. Aaron, look how happy. That's so cool. And then Marty was like, and I want you to know that this church is filled with really strong men too. They're very powerful, they're very influential, and they just don't take any nonsense. And if nonsense pops up, they squash it. So one of our dinners that we had shortly after that, I was just walking around and I was like, oh, I saw that. And I wouldn't have anticipated this from Gary Bryan, but like he saw something happening and then he just squashes it. And Ashley, I don't know what you said, but Gary nipped it in the bud right there. That's just phenomenal. So love it. But looking back over the past 40 years, I bet you have phenomenal memories. And I bet the video took you back to a very sweet spot, and I think that's great. And when you step into the pages of Scripture, you actually see stuff like that unfolding. This guy, Apostle Paul, he had a very close relationship with the local church in Philippi. We read about it in our New Testament, Philippians. And he's writing to this church, and he's reflecting over their time together. And he says, every time I pray, I remember you. And I thank my God when I pray, and I thank him, and I remember you in those moments. And I've just got a little under a year here, but already creating memories. So I can imagine the past 40 years. But he doesn't stop there. He doesn't say it's just, I remember you because of these fun things that happen. He says, I remember you because of your partnership in the gospel from the very first day until now. And I bet that transfers to you. From day one, you've been a partner with Madison Hills Christian Church for 40 years until now. And he's thankful for that, and I'm thankful for that as well. Now, the partnership, it's a really interesting word. And if you've been around church for a while, you know that we talk about how the New Testament was originally written in Greek, and we translate the words. And it comes from a very popular word that you'll read about in your study Bible, or if you get any Christian literature, if you read Christian books, you'll see this word that's koinonia. And that's the word that we translate partnership in this particular text. And it means a participant who mutually belongs. And what I'm learning about Madison Hills Christian Church is that you all have this great capacity to just open the doors to people and allow them to come in and really experience life change so that they become a mutual participant with mutual belonging in this place. You invite them into the life of Madison Hills Christian Church. And that's what we are about. And I think that is phenomenal. You know, many of you know my story, and you know I became a dad when I was a senior in high school, walked across the stage, received my diploma, shook hands with the principal and the superintendent as a dad. And it was a very confusing and tricky and complicated season of my life. And I remember walking through the hallways after people realized that this was going to be part of David Green's story. And I can remember right now so clear walking through the hallways and seeing looks and glances. And I remember looking back at that there wasn't really much help there in a very crucial time in my life. Shortly after that, I went away and spent a weekend with some friends. And I hoped that was going to be kind of a therapeutic time for me to sort some stuff out and to really grasp what was going on in my life at that time. And I spent the weekend with them. And for the entire weekend, these friends of mine verbally assaulted me because of this sin that had just captured my life. So I got no help from the school, and I got no help from my friends. Shortly after that, I found myself in front of a local church. And it's one of these churches with concrete steps, about 7, that lead up to these big, beautiful brown doors in an arched way. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, I've got this little girl whose hand is wrapped around my finger. And I'm standing at these doors and I'm thinking, this church thing, it's got to work. I'm going to give it one shot. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it works, maybe there's something there. So she and I, we trudged up those steps and we walked in. And those people threw their arms around us, embraced us, invited us into what was happening in that community. And I'm a pastor today because of those people. And 40 years ago, you had no idea that I would be standing on this stage. You had no idea that I existed. Had no idea that we would meet. And today, I'm your pastor because of what happened 40 years ago. That's behind those comments that every time I pray, when I think of you, I remember you in my prayers. That's what Paul's saying. We've got a history. We're in this together. We mutually belong. And Paul goes on and he says, it's so right for me to think about you this way. It's so right for me to think like this because of our history. And when you read about Paul being in Philippi in Acts 16, he has these embraces with people where one lady, she invites Paul in to her life. And then you read a little bit more and the statement is, he set a meal before them. So they're being invited into this participation where they can mutually belong and grow. And who knows what the future holds. That's fantastic. And that's something that's part of Madison Hills, has been part of Madison Hills, and will continue to be part of Madison Hills. A way that you have to embrace people, to invite people in, and allow them to mutually belong here as participants in this koinonia life that we have. A couple of people, and I'm wrapping this up because I'm getting really hungry, okay? So wrapping this up. A couple of people, young people, kind of fresh to Madison Hills, about maybe the same length of time that I've been here. Meeting with them yesterday, we're in this coffee shop, sitting at one of the tables, lining the wall. We finish up our business and we're leaving, and I asked them, I said, are you coming to the hymn sing tonight? And they said, oh, yeah. And I was like, okay, I was just checking. But when they said, are you coming? When I said, are you coming? They're like, oh, yeah. It was like incredulous. Like, how would I even ask such a question? Are you coming tonight? And I'm thinking, well, I don't know. You're a little younger. These songs are a little older. Maybe it's not a good fit or a match or whatever. And I said, I wasn't sure if you're coming. And then this gal looks at me and she says, David, that's our church. I wish you could have heard it. David, that's our church. We belong there. And if there's anything true about Madison Hills, it's a place where people belong. Isn't that beautiful? So Paul goes on and he writes, so I'm confident of this, that he who began a good work 40 years ago in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. And that's the promise we have. You know, for some people, that's a miracle. Some people have a really hard time driving up to the property, taking that first step over the threshold of those front doors, walking into a place where they're not known or not knowing how they will be received, whether they will be invited in and something set before them that they can belong to and participate in. We have an opportunity to do that, and sometimes the miracle that we see is a miracle of life change, where so-and-so has something that just drops into their life, and it's a very crucial, critical time, and they're standing. Is this going to make a difference? I'll give this one shot. So a changed life is a very powerful thing. And if you've got some free time over the next few weeks, we're going to start a new series next week, and it's called Miracles. And we're going to walk through the Gospel of John and see just how Jesus gets involved in people's lives and brings about life change. So we hope that you're here, and we also hope that you invite someone into this koinonia community that we have going on. Sound good? All right.